Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
So, everyone, hi. It's great to see you. Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this moment, or so I'm told. And welcome to Chapel Perilous. Chapel Perilous is a space where we train to face the uncertainties of the world, where we push the boundaries of who we are and how we think. So it fits in rather perfectly here at the Stoa. So I see Chapel Perilous. I was talking a little bit about this last week, but I've had time to think about it now. And I conceive of this space as a space where we address one of the core problems that we as humans have. And it's one of those problems that we don't like to look at directly because it's a bit intimidating, a bit scary perhaps. But once you notice it, you see it everywhere. And I think that problem is intolerance of uncertainty. And like I said, once you start looking for it, there it is. You see people so certain they're right that they're absolute dicks to each other on the internet and in real life sometimes. You see all sorts of individual psychological neuroses. And then there's this big, society-wide existential meaning crisis that seems to be going around. But for me, it's personal. I'm one of those people who really likes to be in control of things. I like things to make sense. I like order. I like control. And I know this is not a realistic way to live my life, obviously, because the world isn't under my control and often it doesn't seem to make much sense. But I didn't realize quite how unflattering this sort of perspective looked on me until I heard myself described in the pages of Peter's diary, or on his online journal. I'll keep what I read in his private diaries private. So he described people like me as rationalists who ameliorate their anxiety through control. Yeah, that stung. He didn't say people like Rebecca, but that's how I interpreted it because I'm a massive narcissist. So I decided I need a place to work on this. I need a place to sort of integrate those classic lessons from the Stoics that sound so good when you read them, but to actually bring them into my life. I thought psychotechnologies that reduced my intolerance to uncertainty, things would be a lot easier to deal with. And of course, I need people to go on this journey with, because it's hard to do these things alone. So that's you guys. I mean, this is us, and this is Chapel Perilous. As I said, this is it's something that I've been mulling over for a while, but the term Chapel Perilous only popped into my head a fortnight ago. So I've been going on this sort of like a corkboard adventure. I don't actually have a corkboard out, but that's what's going on in my head, the corkboard with all the string and the pins and everything. So I'm going to take you through what I've figured out so far about what Chapel Perilous is, and I'll start with the history of the term. That kind of makes sense to me, and I hope it makes sense to you guys, at least a little bit of sense. Let's see if I can show you what I've been up to, what I've been thinking about. Here we go. You guys can all see that, right? That is the wild wood. And the wild wood is a term that is used to describe Britain's primary forests. So the primary forests are, those ones that have been there ever since the beginning, I suppose. And that's where all those classic Grail romances are. So anything Arthurian, that's all set in the wild wood, or it's sometimes called the waste forest, but I prefer the term wild wood. And the first time Chapel Perilous turns up is in one of these Grail romances. And it's a hero, and all these stories mirror each other, so it's many heroes, really. This journey has been taken many times. But it's a hero going on his quest for the Grail, and he's going through the wildwood, and it's dense and it's scary. And the thing about the wildwood is it's intimidating because you don't know what might be behind any particular tree. Just imagine a super dense forest. And of course, because it's one of those old stories, it's a dark and stormy night. So he has to seek shelter in this chapel. And he goes into the chapel thinking, phew, I'm in the chapel now, everything's fine. Unfortunately, not so. He sees in the dim light, in the flickering candlelight, he sees there's a dead body laid out on the altar. And then, just as he starts to back away from the body, the guttering candlelight is extinguished by these blackened hands reaching in through the windows and putting out all the candles. And suddenly he's in the dark, and this sound, just this moaning, intense sound, and they're shifting around on the dead body on the altar, and it's just terrifying. Thankfully, that's not our Chapel Perilous. But I do think it's interesting that this turns up in Grail quests, because Grail quests, I mean, it symbolizes all sorts of things. We often think of it as linked to, you know, Jesus and stuff, but actually there are stories where it is not anything to do with religion. But I do think it kind of represents the old certainties, like religion, like the idea of a natural order, like the idea that there's one true king who'll come back and make everything right again. It represents certainty. And that's often what religions promise to give us, don't they? I mean, Scientology is actually called the religion of certainty, or the science of certainty, I think they call it. So that's what a lot of people are trying to sell to us. They're trying to sell us certainty. Maybe we could think of those old certainties that become a bit destabilized now as sort of Grail-like. Because the reason why I say this is because the next time I find on my internet journey researching Chapel Perilous and trying to figure out what we're doing here is in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. So this is 1922, obviously. I'll read you the relevant stanza to give you an idea of his vision of Chapel Perilous. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves about the chapel. There is the empty chapel, only the home. It has no windows and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. This is one of my favorite poems, but it doesn't actually mention Chapel Perilous by name. It's just the chapel. So I didn't know of the link until I started researching. It's written in his notes. But The Wasteland is a post-apocalyptic poem. You have to imagine, like, in 1920s, he's writing in London, and everything, like, First World War has just finished. No one knows what's going on. Everything they used to believe in, everything they held sacred is gone. Just the fact that a war like that could happen has shaken humanity. It's a time where they're questioning whether they can ever go back to what they had before, or if there is even anything to go back to. So it's a very, like, liminal space. And this isn't our Chapel Perilous either. Although I do like the hymns. The poem ends with shanty, 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 which is beautiful. So that brought me thinking about the word liminal. I've always been obsessed by this word. I probably overuse it. And the reason I overuse it is I learned it in university where I studied English literature. It might not surprise you to hear. And I remember being familiar with the concept, and I sort of had an actual location for the word liminal that made sense to me. And it was here in the wood between the worlds. This is from The Magician's Nephew, which is the prequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in the Narnian Chronicles. So it's a really beautiful wood. It's really dense, like the wildwood, and it's described as the quietest wood you can imagine. You can hear the trees growing, and the kids, when they go in there, the human children who venture into this wood, quickly forget where they came from. And I think it's really apropos that I envision Chapel Perilous being in a wood like this. It is, for me at least, sort of an archetypal liminal space. And in T.S. Eliot, when he's writing about Chapel Perilous, the last of the wildwood has almost been completely destroyed because of the industrial efforts for World War I. So you had this, like, as the space where these stories could unfold was destroyed, he was still kind of hoping to find it or looking for something there. And the pools, if you just carry on with me on this journey, and I know it's a little bit strange, but we'll get there in the end. So the pools remind me of Robert Anton Wilson's Reality Tunnels. So this is the book where I first came across the term Chapel Perilous, which was a fortnight ago. Been so far since then. Robert Anton Wilson's idea of reality tunnels, and this was in his book Cosmic Trigger, which came out in 1977, are these, hey, perfect. I like it when people bring reading material. So, as you may know, the reality tunnels are kind of like these lenses through which you see the world, but they also shape your perception. They tempt you in with a promise of certainty. That's kind of the siren singing at the end of each reality tunnel. To me, they seem quite analogous to what Peter talks about when he talks about mimetic tribes. And interestingly, as you'll know if you've read the book, Robert Anton Wilson describes almost going insane from immersing himself in all these contradictory conspiracy theories, reality tunnels, which is exactly what Peter describes. Well, maybe not insane, but a little bit after immersing himself in the ideology of all the different mimetic tribes. And I have a podcast called The Seeker and the Skeptic, where I get really into all different new age subcultures. I feel like I've been on the brink for a little while. So Robert Anton Wilson describes Chapel Perilous as that time when you're wondering whether what you're perceiving is real or if it's just in your head, when the map is inadequate for the territory. And this isn't quite our Chapel Perilous either, but it's really close. So I think our Chapel Perilous doesn't exist yet. I think this is us building it right now. And I think it's going to incorporate some of the themes of the previous Chapel Perilouses that do exist or have existed in literature. So I think there's going to be it's going to be challenging, and we're going to need to be brave. And I know that sounds silly because this is just talking on the internet, but I think we need to bring something of that kind of questing spirit to it. I think that as in Eliot's Chapel Perilous, there's going to be a sense of disillusionment and perhaps even mourning as we have to let go of some things that seemed important to us, or seemed like the way things were, perhaps. And I hope that there's going to be a sense of sort of play and liberation, as in Robert Anton Wilson's Chapel Perilous. He said, Robert Anton Wilson that is, that when you go through Chapel Perilous, you either come out insane or agnostic. And I don't know what's going to happen to all of us. I don't know what's going to happen to me, but I'm hoping to come out different. I want to be able to face uncertainty instead of being tempted into those different reality tunnels. And I want to prevent myself from just exhausting myself from searching for that holy grail of like meta, everything will make sense. I want to be able to live in this probabilistic universe in an honest way and kind of be okay with myself at the same time. That's my goal. So that's how we all got here. Now, to continue the metaphor, I'm going to ask you all to step up and make an offering at the altar of agnosticism. Peter, could you turn off the recording? Shit's about to get real.